They thought they'd won. They thought dumping me and my wife Martha, in separate filthy nursing homes miles apart was the perfect way to get rid of us. The final act in their play of concern and control. But in their greedy rush to grab our assets and live in their palace, they forgot one single multi-million-dollar detail. They forgot we co-signed the loan for that monstrosity. And that little oversight, that was the key I needed, lying here in the stench and despair, to unlock their ruin. My name is Harold. And this is the story of how my own children tried to bury me alive, and how I clawed my way out using the very chains they'd wrapped around themselves. The air in this room is thick with the smell of ammonia and regret. It clings to the thin, scratchy blanket they toss over me at night. Outside my grimy window? A brick wall. Day in, day out. This is where my son, David, and my daughter, Sarah, decided I belong. And Martha, my beloved wife of 55 years, she's enduring the same misery in another building just like this one across town. Easier for visiting, they'd claimed, their faces smooth masks of lies. Easier to ensure we couldn't comfort each other, more like. Easier to pretend we simply didn't exist anymore. While they lived it up in a house so grand it looked like something out of a magazine. A house built on our trust and our signatures. For 40 years I taught history. Martha worked at the town library. We weren't wealthy, but we built a good life, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. Our pride wasn't in possessions, but in the family we raised, David and Sarah. We poured our hearts, our time, and yes, our savings into giving them the best start we could. We believed in them, supported their dreams, celebrated their successes, and helped them up when they stumbled. Maybe we helped too much. Maybe we made it too easy. Retirement was meant to be our reward. We sold the big family house, the one filled with echoes of laughter and slammed doors, and bought a cozy little condo. Life slowed down to a pleasant rhythm. Coffee on the balcony, Martha's book club, my meetups with fellow veterans. We took a modest cruise, visited a few national parks. Mostly, we just cherished the quiet comfort of being together, side by side, after a life lived for others. Felt earned. Stable. Our children had their own lives, their own families. David was in finance, always sharply dressed, always talking deals. Sarah married, had 2 kids we adored, and worked in marketing, always presenting the perfect image. We saw them for holidays, birthdays. We babysat the grandkids whenever they asked. And whenever they hit a rough patch, a car repair, a down payment, an unexpected bill, they knew they could turn to us. We'd dip into our nest egg, tighten our belts a little. Martha would sometimes gently caution me, "Harold, we need to be careful." But how could we refuse? Seeing them comfortable felt like our duty, our legacy. We trusted them. Completely. That was the door we left wide open for the trouble that was coming. Looking back, the little hints of entitlement, the casual disregard for our sacrifices, it was all there. We just refused to see it. The change began like a subtle shift in the wind. More frequent visits from David and Sarah, which initially warmed our hearts. But the conversation started to feel pointed. Loaded. "Dad, maybe let me get that box down for you," David would insist when I was perfectly capable. "Mom, are you sure you took your pills this morning?" Sarah would ask, planting seeds of doubt. It was like they were building a case, quietly, methodically, documenting our supposed decline. Then came the glossy brochures, spread across our dining table during Sunday dinner. Pictures of an enormous house. Gated community, sprawling lawns, a kitchen that looked like a television set. "Isn't it amazing, Mom, Dad?" Sarah would bubble. "Imagine the grandkids playing in that yard. It's an investment in their future." David would add facts about square footage and school ratings, his eyes gleaming with ambition. It looked less like a home and more like a statement. A very, very expensive statement. A knot of unease formed in my gut. How could they possibly afford this? The answer arrived one evening, cloaked in filial concern. They sat us down on our sofa, the familiar floral pattern suddenly feeling alien under the weight of their purpose. David cleared his throat, a sound that seemed to echo in the quiet room. "Mom, Dad, we need to ask you something important." I glanced at Martha. Her smile was tight, her eyes wary. She felt it too. "We found it," Sarah breathed, leaning forward, her eyes shining. "The dream house. It's perfect. But the bank is being difficult about the mortgage size." "Just a formality," they said. David picked up the thread seamlessly. "They just want a little extra security. Co-signers." Our income is solid, covers everything easily, but you know how banks are. He waved a dismissive hand. It's just paperwork, really. It won't impact you at all. Just helps us get approved. Co-signers. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. On a mortgage for that place? The amount had to be astronomical. I felt Martha stiffen beside me. David, Sarah, that's an immense responsibility, I said, choosing my words carefully. A house like that, are you absolutely certain you can manage the payments long-term? 100%, Dad. David's assurance felt a fraction too quick, too loud. We've crunched the numbers. This is just bureaucratic nonsense. Your name's on the paper, grease the wheels, that's all. Sarah placed a hand on Martha's knee, her touch meant to be reassuring but feeling possessive. Please, Mom? Think of the children. This is for them. It would mean everything. We hesitated. Every instinct screamed caution. This felt reckless, irresponsible. But they were our children. They painted a picture of familial bliss, dangled the grandkids' happiness like bait, and minimized the risk until it sounded trivial. They framed our hesitation as hindering their future, as doubting their capabilities. The guilt started to creep in, insidious and effective. Over the next few days, the pressure was relentless: calls, texts, sad-eyed visits. The deal might fall through, we'll lose our deposit, the kids will be heartbroken. Worn down, wanting to believe in the best version of our children, wanting them to be happy, we caved. We went to the bank. The sheer volume of paper was overwhelming. The loan amount made my blood run cold. Martha's hand shook as she signed, her signature smaller than usual, hesitant. I added mine, a knot of dread tightening in my chest. David and Sarah hugged us, overflowing with theatrical gratitude. You're the best parents ever, Sarah exclaimed. You won't regret this, David promised, clapping me on the back. The irony would become almost unbearable later. They were the ones who would regret it deeply. Once those signatures dried, the warmth vanished like morning mist. The effusive thanks were replaced by a steady, unnerving drumbeat of concerned trolling. Our supposed frailties became their favorite topic. I fumbled with my keys one morning. Dad, your coordination seems off, maybe driving isn't safe anymore. Martha repeated an anecdote. Oh, Mom, you told us that yesterday. Your memory, we really need to think about getting you some support. It was like water torture, drip by drip eroding our confidence. They started helping in ways that felt more like taking over. David insisted on managing our online banking. It's complicated, Dad, let me handle it. Sarah canceled Martha's cherished volunteer shift at the library. Too much standing, Mom, you need to rest. Each gesture was framed as love, as care, but it felt like being wrapped in invisible chains. We'd push back gently, we're managing just fine, dear, but they'd counter with stories of falls, scams targeting seniors, escalating our minor slips into impending catastrophes. They expertly played on our deepest fear, becoming a burden. We started second-guessing ourselves. Maybe they were right? Maybe we were declining faster than we realized? Their constant negativity was exhausting, chipping away at our resolve. Then came the final, decisive maneuver: power of attorney. They arrived armed with documents, their faces masks of solemn duty. Just a safeguard, David explained, his tone smooth as silk. So we can step in if something happens. Pay bills, talk to doctors if you can't. It protects everyone. Sarah added her piece, eyes wide with practiced sincerity. We promise it's only for emergencies. It gives us peace of mind, knowing we can take care of you properly. We were tired. So incredibly tired of the subtle warfare, the constant implication that we were failing. The idea of them handling the bureaucracy should the worst happen seemed almost a relief. They were our children. We were conditioned to trust them, to believe in their inherent goodness despite the growing evidence to the contrary. With heavy hearts, feeling confused and cornered, we signed the papers. We handed them the legal power over our lives. A chill snaked down my spine as my pen left the page. It felt irrevocable, final. But surely they wouldn't misuse it? Surely this was just paperwork? The charade ended the moment the ink was dry. The concerned children dissolved, replaced by cold, efficient administrators of our lives. Control was immediate and absolute. Our bank accounts were consolidated under David's name. Our access to funds became subject to their approval. It's simpler this way, Dad, David stated flatly when I asked why my pension check hadn't gone into my account. Our world shrank rapidly. Phone calls were monitored, visits curtailed. When Martha protested about missing her library friends, Sarah replied coolly, "Mom, you get agitated easily now. Quiet is better for you." My requests to attend my veterans' breakfast were met with, "Too risky, Dad. We can't have you falling." They were isolating us, systematically cutting our ties to the outside world, priming us for the final betrayal. It came without warning. A Tuesday morning. 2 cars pulled up. David and Sarah emerged, not with smiles but with grim determination. With them were 2 stern-faced individuals who looked like they specialized in moving inconvenient obstacles. There was no preamble, no discussion. "Mom, Dad, we've made arrangements for your care," Sarah announced, her gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "Care? What are you talking about?" My voice trembled. Martha grabbed my arm, her knuckles white. "We found excellent facilities," David cut in, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Places equipped to handle your needs. It's much safer." "Facilities? Plural?" Martha's whisper was barely audible. You wouldn't separate us?" Sarah's eyes finally met mine, cold and hard. "Your needs are different now. It's the most practical solution." "Practical? For them?" We argued, pleaded, tears streaming down Martha's face. I felt rage bubbling beneath the shock. This was our home. They couldn't just... But they could. They had the power of attorney. The admission papers were already signed. The strangers moved forward, gently but inexorably guiding us towards the doors, towards separate cars. I reached for Martha, my fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second before she was led away. The image of her terrified, weeping face as her car pulled away is burned into my memory. My heart didn't just break, it felt like it turned to stone in my chest. The excellent facility was a pit. The smell alone was an assault, stale urine, cheap disinfectant, and hopelessness. My room was a tiny cell with peeling paint and a view of stained brick. The staff were shadows, overworked and numb. The food was mush, the days endless gray stretches of boredom and despair. Communication with the outside was virtually impossible. I later learned, through a whispered, fearful exchange with a kinder aide, that Martha was in a similar hellhole across town. Dumped. Discarded. While our children played Lord and Lady of the Manor, funded by our life savings and secured by our names on their massive loan. The grief was crushing, but beneath it, something else began to smolder, pure, unadulterated fury. They thought this was the end of our story. They were wrong. It was just the beginning of theirs. Time lost meaning in that place. Each day bled into the next, marked only by the clatter of meal trays and the drone of the television in the hall. The loneliness was a constant, physical ache. Missing Martha felt like missing a limb. The sheer injustice of it all gnawed at me, trapped, powerless, betrayed by the 2 people we loved most. But anger is a powerful fuel. And my mind, trapped within these 4 walls, started working. Late one night, staring at the familiar water stains mapping the ceiling, it came to me. Not in a flash, but as a slow, dawning realization that sent a jolt through my despair. The mansion. The co-signing. We were still legally on the hook for that enormous mortgage. David and Sarah, blinded by greed and their own perceived cleverness in securing the power of attorney, had likely forgotten its significance. They were so focused on controlling our modest assets, on silencing us, they'd overlooked the massive financial liability they had tied us to. Had they been making the payments consistently? David loved the appearance of success, but was it just that, an appearance? Could they actually afford that extravagant lifestyle and the crippling mortgage payments? Especially if they were also dipping into our funds? A tiny seed of hope took root in the barren ground of my despair. If they defaulted, even slightly, as co-signers we would have rights. Leverage. The very thing they'd used to trap us could become our key to freedom. The first hurdle was immense: communication. No phone, supervised visits. I needed to reach Martha. I needed to reach Mr. Henderson, our old family lawyer, a man of integrity. My chance came in the form of Maria, a young aide with kind eyes that hadn't yet been hardened by the grim reality of the place. I'd been hoarding the few dollars they allowed me each week. One evening, heart pounding, I pressed the crumpled bills into her hand as she collected my untouched dinner tray. "Maria, please," I whispered, my voice thick with desperation. "I need you to make one phone call for me. It's life or death." She looked terrified, glancing down the empty corridor. Helping residents contact the outside world was strictly forbidden, grounds for dismissal. But she saw something in my eyes, desperation, perhaps, or determination. She nodded almost imperceptibly, took the scrap of paper with Henderson's number, and vanished. The waiting was agony. Days crawled by. Had she made the call? Had Henderson gotten the message? Then, one afternoon, Maria slipped a folded note into my palm along with my medication cup. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Martha's familiar script, shaky but clear. Harold, they forgot. Lawyer knows. Waiting for word. Stay strong. Love, She knew. She'd remembered too. And somehow she had also managed to get word to Henderson. Hope surged through me, fierce and bright. A few days later, Mr. Henderson arrived. His expression was grim as he took in the depressing room, the stale air. He got straight to the point. Harold, Martha contacted me. I've pulled the documents for the property your children purchased. He paused, his gaze sharp. You were right to be concerned. There have been several late payments flagged. The bank has issued warnings. Technically, they are on the verge of default. My breath caught. So, what can we do? Henderson leaned in, his voice low and conspiratorial. As co-signers, you are fully liable, which means you also have standing. We can argue that the power of attorney used to manage your finances, while simultaneously neglecting this major liability, was obtained under duress and potentially fraudulently applied, given your subsequent confinement. He tapped his briefcase. We demand immediate remedy of the arrears. If they can't or won't comply immediately, we petition the court to force the sale of the asset to protect the co-signers, you and Martha, from further liability and credit damage. Force the sale. Their castle, built on lies and cruelty, could be brought crashing down. A grim satisfaction, cold and sharp, settled over me. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. Let's proceed. Force the sale. The game, I realized, wasn't over. It had just entered its final, decisive round. The legal letters, sent via registered mail demanding immediate payment of all mortgage arrears and citing our position as liable co-signers, landed like bombshells. The silence from David and Sarah lasted less than 2 days. My room door flew open with such force it banged against the wall. David stood there, his usually immaculate suit slightly rumpled, his face puce with rage and panic. Sarah hovered behind him, white-faced, eyes blazing. A flustered nurse peeked in, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Dad, what is the meaning of this? David thrust the legal letter towards me, his hand shaking. What game are you playing? I looked up at him from my worn armchair, feeling a strange sense of calm detachment. The fear radiating from him was thick enough to taste. It's not a game, David, I replied evenly. It's called responsibility. The responsibility you placed on us when you had us co-sign that loan. We're simply ensuring our legal obligations and our credit aren't destroyed by your mismanagement. Sarah stepped forward, spitting fury. You can't. We have power of attorney. You're obviously confused, we handle all the finances. Ah, the power of attorney, I said, allowing a note of steel into my voice. The one obtained through emotional blackmail and lies? The one you used to justify locking your mother and me away in these godforsaken places while you lived like kings and queens? Mr. Henderson seems quite confident that the circumstances under which it was obtained, and how it's been used in conjunction with neglecting this massive debt, will be of great interest to a judge. Especially when framed as elder abuse. David's face went slack, the color draining away. He was starting to understand. Look, Dad, maybe there was a slight delay with the payment. An oversight. We can sort it out. An oversight? I let out a short, harsh laugh. Multiple missed payments? Default warnings from the bank? That's not an oversight, son. That's gross incompetence. Or perhaps, you simply couldn't afford the palace you bought after draining our accounts? You were so busy discarding us, you forgot the multi-million-dollar anchor tied around your necks, our signatures. You wouldn't? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling now. The scandal. Think of your grandchildren. Oh, believe me, we are thinking of the grandchildren, I retorted, my voice hard as flint. We're thinking about the parents who taught them that elderly relatives are disposable, that honesty is optional, that living beyond your means on stolen funds is acceptable. We're thinking about the future they'll have when their parents are bankrupt and disgraced. I met David's panicked gaze directly. Mr. Henderson has already filed the initial paperwork. You have 30 days to satisfy the entire outstanding mortgage balance, plus all penalties and fees. If you fail, and we both know you will, the court will order the sale of the house to cover the debt. Our debt. The transformation was startling. The arrogance crumbled, replaced by raw, naked fear. David stammered, "But, the house, everything's tied up, where would we even go?" Sarah dissolved into choked sobs. "Dad, please, we made a mistake, a terrible mistake. We're so sorry." Sorry. The word echoed hollowly in the cheap room. Sorry for getting caught, perhaps. I thought of Martha, alone miles away. I thought of the cold nights, the bad food, the crushing loneliness, the sheer, calculated cruelty of their actions. Any lingering flicker of parental pity died within me. "Mistakes have consequences, Sarah," I said flatly. "You built your dream house on a foundation of deceit. Now watch it crumble." I gestured vaguely towards the door. "I believe it's almost time for my lukewarm broth. You should probably go." They stared, speechless, their faces masks of disbelief and despair. Then, the fight seemingly gone out of them, they turned and stumbled out, leaving only the faint, incongruous scent of expensive perfume and shattered entitlement hanging in the air. Justice might be slow, but its arrival felt incredibly satisfying. As expected, David and Sarah couldn't conjure the small fortune needed to save the mansion. Their attempts to stall, to plead, to refinance, all failed. The court order was issued. The house went up for sale, not on their terms but as a forced liquidation by the bank. It sold relatively quickly, likely for less than its market value, enough to clear the mortgage debt and associated fees, but leaving little, if anything, for my children. The fallout was swift and brutal. We heard through Mr. Henderson and later through the grapevine that David and Sarah were forced to vacate the property immediately. Their lavish furniture went into storage they couldn't afford. They lost the house, their inflated social standing evaporated overnight, and they were reportedly drowning in debt from their extravagant spending, now compounded by legal bills. Last we heard, they were living in a cramped rental apartment on the far side of town, facing the very real possibility of bankruptcy and further legal action from us to recover the funds they'd misappropriated. And us? Mr. Henderson skillfully used the leverage from the mortgage situation to successfully challenge the power of attorney in court. We proved undue influence, clear financial mismanagement, and demonstrable harm caused by their actions. We regained control of our remaining assets. They hadn't managed to spend everything. It wasn't a fortune, but coupled with the proceeds from finally selling our condo ourselves, it was enough. Enough to walk out of those dreadful nursing homes for good. Enough for Martha and me to move into a bright, comfortable apartment in a reputable assisted living community, together. We have our own space, friendly staff who treat us with dignity, good meals, and activities we can choose to join. Our balcony overlooks a lovely garden, and every morning we have coffee out there, side by side. Holding Martha's hand again, seeing her smile, sharing the simple rhythm of our days, that is the true victory. The scars from our children's betrayal remain. Trust, once shattered so profoundly by your own flesh and blood, never fully mends. We learned a harsh lesson about greed, entitlement, and the darkness that can fester behind a familiar face. But sitting here now, watching the sunset paint the clouds orange and purple, I feel a sense of peace I thought was lost forever. David and Sarah chose their path. They chased a shallow dream and ended up with nothing. We endured the nightmare, but we found our way back to the light, together. We learned about our own resilience, the enduring power of our bond, and the quiet strength that comes from surviving the unthinkable. We have each other. And that, in the end, is everything.